Alright, how's it going, everyone? This is Anon. This is none of this is financial advice. This is for entertainment purposes only. Alright, so I'm just taking a look. I don't think we'll do a long stream tonight. This week's been pretty slow as far as everything's kind of just chopping around in the same place. Let's take a look. Yeah, we're possibly retesting this channel right here. We'll see what tomorrow brings. You know, I thought what was going to happen was it was going to come up and try to fill this gap at 220. I think it was at 221, or sorry, 421.22. But essentially, what I think is going on is we're in this weird kind of like it's either going to break up or break down from here. I know that's kind of everywhere. What's up, random? I was just eyeballing this channel, and it's been kind of holding true so far, but it's coming down and trying to test the bottom here. It's done it twice. ATER and SPY to 0. If the SPY goes to 0, then we've got bigger problems to worry about. There'll probably be people rioting in the streets. But yeah, so we're in this just like, it's, you know, we bounced off here, we broke over, and now it's kind of just like this kind of chop. And the question is, are we going to come back up and fill this gap at 421, or are we going to break down and fill this gap at 396? So that's obviously the big question. Then we've got a bunch of other tickers that we've been kind of eyeballing for a while, and we're going to see what those do. Let me see if I can get something up real quick, because there's something I've been meaning to do. I've been trying to actually... Let me see if this works. I'm trying to free up space on my hard drive, just because on my C drive, I've been having issues with it constantly running out of space. And I think it's because always like the Windows updates are always happening. I was already low on space, and all the software updates they push out. So let me see if I can get some stuff going. All right. I want to take most of this stuff out, like application data. I need to get rid of a bunch of things here. So I wonder if I can just take all this stuff and just dump it in here, so I can kind of get things back to normal and get going. All right, let's do that. Music, no music, no email attachments. There's a bunch of stuff in here. I'll probably have to do this later, but I just want to free up a little bit of stuff, so I can make sure that the thing's not going to crash. All right, that's good enough for now. So, what do you guys want to talk about tonight? I'm mainly doing this just because, you know, I said I would. Oh, did I look into the Hub C, the IPO? Yeah, I started to look into it, and then my boss actually needed me, so let's take a look at them real quick. Was this the one with the... No, this was a different one. Yeah, this wasn't the one with the... What kind of warrants were they? Oh my god, I can't remember. It's because I had a couple cocktails at the happy hour I was at. What were they? What was the email one? Let me see if I can remember. Oh, you know what? I know where I can find the information that we were doing. Put it in here. They were reset warrants. That's what they were. So is ATER officially dead at this point? No, I mean, they're still alive. I mean, there's not much action going to go on until May. That's what I can tell you. So ATER basically, from the time they basically announced the... here, let me just show you what's going on with the Tyrion. So here's the deal, all right? This is where everything was breaking down, right? They issued out warrants right here, right? These $2 warrants were issued out right here. We broke down, and then we were consolidating for a while. It dipped, came back up, ran, and then has been slowly bleeding off right back to this consolidation, or actually a little bit slower, slightly lower than this consolidation level. We're basically back here near the lows. So what's ending up happening is this. So this green line right here is the Craig Hallium when they are able to exercise the $2 warrants. So what's happening in between now and then is this. So you've got our earnings here in May, like late May. I think it's like May 15th. So if you actually look at the options chains, there's absolutely no volume up until May when they release the earnings. So I think there's like, I don't know, like 1,000 or it was like 1,200 for... I think it was like $1 strikes. And there was another 1,200 or maybe more than that for the I think $2 strikes. It was like $1, $1.50, and $2, right? So all those strike prices make me think that somebody's playing this on earnings that it's going to be coming up. Now the real one that matters is the August one, or sorry, not yeah, it's August. This one right here. I probably should label it now that I think about it. Here, let me label it. This is the earnings that matters. It should be third quarter earnings for ATER, right? So this one right here is the one that probably matters the most. This third quarter earnings. So I expect the stock to pretty much be like this yellow line is the previous low, the all-time low. So we could bounce off that, create a double bottom again, but we have earnings coming up here that could send us slightly higher just to consolidate back around this range again, which was like around like $1 and some change, like $1.20. So like $1 to $1.20. That's where I expect it to go, is basically bounce off the bottom, consolidate probably up here in this like $1 to $1.20 range when it settles out after this earnings. And I expect this stock to probably make a move, if it's going to make a move, around third quarter, which is when they are thinking that they'll go positive EBITDA. So that's basically what's going on. But in between then, here is one of the earnings, and I should probably put a little line up too. So there's. So this was first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter. So what I expect is probably a dip to the like low and then maybe consolidation after this earnings. And I think they're going to start making a move somewhere in this time frame, like around here. Maybe I can highlight that somehow. Highlighter. I don't know what color it is, but so I would kind of expect it to do something like this, possibly. If the move's going to come, and I think it's going to be like in this time frame, and maybe we get back up to around mid, somewhere around here before. If it does go positive EBITDA there, that will be at least a sign that the company is recovering, and at that point, that's where I expect something to move back up into this range, maybe like $2. It could go higher than that if they decide to unlock the warrants, because if they get it up to, I think it was, they're not profitable on those ones until I think we said 266. So 266 would be here-ish. and then you're filling some of these gaps too. So each one of these red lines is a gap. So I would expect it to be in this range sometime later in this year. That's just what I think is going to happen. But, you know, obviously this could be a dip and then stronger spike. You can kind of see where these things have happened before. I probably should have, let me do this. Let me erase it because I need to, if we're going to be doing this right, we should probably do it a little more accurate because it doesn't just go up and kind of consolidate. It usually goes in waves. So what I should do is something like, you know, kind of come down, possibly come up a little bit on earnings. Then something like this, or, you know, it once again, this is just a guess. So, but, you know, it can be steeper. Who knows? I mean, if they surprise on this earnings, then you could have the run a lot sooner. But I think right now, none of the options even pick up until basically after like mid-May. So like options right now on Ethereum aren't picking up at all until then. So I would say mid to late May, down like this area. I should take that. That's like, can you overlay Wyckoff? I don't know. I've never tried that on here. Quick search. Let's see if we can add something. Not really. But what I could do is this. I can pull up an image because I think I have one saved on my computer. Give me a second. Let's pull up Wyckoff real quick. All right, so let's do accumulation. All right, so this is where it would have came down. Right here, comes down hard. Now, we haven't had really the second spike unless we zoom out a lot, which if I do that, it's not giving the best view. So let me try. The week's even worse. Let's try this. Let's try this overlay and see if it works. It's not going to look great. It really should be on the daily because I think that's more likely. Let's see. Where is my... All right. So you'd have this thing, and it's possible this could be in this area right here. We should have a spring then sometime around this time frame. See if I can zoom it. If I pull it out, it makes it a little... There. Okay, so we have this run down. We have a run down, right? Now, normally you would have had a spike back up, but it really didn't get that. It's not always going to be perfect, right? But then you come down here, right, for, excuse me, the spring test in phase B, which would be basically this low right there. You would have had a run up here, which is kind of like this. And then it's slow bleed off, right? So this is our slow bleed off period. We should have one more like extreme low. So if I'm going to do this right, we should have an extreme low. So like the worst of it will probably be coming up if this is kind of like following that same, right? So this is our slow bleed off here in phase B. That means you would have essentially a spring test down. Well, that's probably way too low. Well, that's 60s. That's not too bad, right? Oh, that was 30s, huh? That's too low. I mean, if they announce dilution, then yeah, we're going to get down there. But in this case, let's just see if we have a spring test down, possibly making the new low, and then a series of runs in this, right? Maybe a little higher, but should test one of these lines, and then this is where it would move up into, it's maybe a little aggressive. Let me pull that back. Be more of like a gradual, right? Let's see if that. Have to stretch it again. So something like this would be kind of like the thought. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what it looks like. Or it could be earnings and then the new low. Like we could just chop around here. Might run up before earnings and then head down lower here. I mean, these are, once again, nothing's a perfect match. It's just it's Wyckoff when you're dealing with it. Can we do this? If I did, I'm gonna overlay it real quick. You know, we'll make this maybe a different color. You know, we'll see. I mean, did trades have a mental breakdown? So I don't want to talk bad about anyone. He's a former military guy too. But what I can tell you is, number one, whenever you put yourself out there on the internet, and obviously mine is a lot different than his, but I can tell you there's a lot of, I guess, responsibility slash, guilt slash, pride that goes along with this. And I can tell you, like, when things don't go right, like, so for him, he thought things were going to squeeze to the moon. And essentially what it sounds like it happened is, obviously, when things started going badly and he started understanding how the stock market works a little bit more, because you have to remember, he was learning while he was doing this. You really have to be, like, built for something different. Like, you can pretend like it doesn't bother you when people, sit there and talk crap about you all day long. But at some point it does get to you. And I dealt with that with Ethereum. I dealt with that, with Spur Degree. And it's like, okay, well, clearly, what's up, Ozzy? How are you? Clearly, it's one of those things where not everyone can do this, especially you would think the amount of money he was bringing in. Yeah, I mean, I don't wish anything bad on the guy. I mean, I think he was learning as he was going. And I think the biggest problem with that is he had all of a sudden, literally hundreds of thousands of people sitting there listening to him, and he's giving them bad information. And I know what that feels like. And here's the thing, had everything gone right with Ethereum, if retail hadn't freaked out and sold, there was a possibility that Ethereum would have actually squeezed, because they had to hire bots to basically start being they got nervous once it got over 6, because that's when they could have lost control. Yeah, Trey got used because he didn't understand that APRN, in his mind, APRN was supposed to be a good guy that was basically going to help them, him and other shareholders make a lot of money. And what he started realizing as he learned more and more is APRN was using retail. They were not the same as GameStop. They had a completely different situation. Because Trey didn't know how to read financial statements, which he started learning later, once he learned financial statements, all of a sudden everything changed. And I think that's when he started seeing the moves APRN was making and going, wait a second, you said you were on our side. Yeah, literally, the stock market is a zero-sum game. there are winners and there are losers on every single trade. Like, it's not like, oh, we both made out great. No, like, if somebody's buying and somebody's selling, someone's right and someone's wrong. And even if you're right, it doesn't mean that everything goes the way you plan. Like, there are a lot of ways around regulation and things that, like, for example, like, I'm sitting there complaining about, like, Reg Show and how long Tyrion was on it. And, you know, I'm sitting there talking and going, well, I don't understand how this can happen. So I call FINRA, and FINRA's like, oh, no, they just rotate. Like, it's not by, like, 13 days and that's it. It's basically 13 days to come into compliance. And I'm like, well, okay, so you're telling me something can be on Reg Show indefinitely. And they were like, yeah, you know, like, look at overstock.com, for example. So, like, overstock.com, and some people don't know this, but overstock.com was on Reg Show for 666 straight days. That's insanity. Yeah, I mean, so what it comes down to is this. Like, people like Trey and, you know, Zip Trader and some of these other guys who, like, this is their career, you know, that's awesome that they are able to make a career out of it. Like, obviously, I am not at that point. But, you know, it's one of those things where it's hard when, you know, you're, like, calling out a play, and then if things go sideways, you're sitting there and you're the one blamed. And, you know, I've gotten death threats. I've gotten people sitting there, you know, calling me every name in the book in my DMs. I had people publicly calling me out in the Discord that we don't kick out. I just said, listen, let them talk. Like, so it's tough. I mean, you put out your due diligence. You try to do as much homework as you can, and then you hope for the best. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I talked about DTC way back in the day, and it's moved up very nicely. Just to show you, for example, like, I wrote DD on DTC back when it was like $3 a share, and now it's sitting here $8 a share, and no one's giving me credit for that. But everyone's going to call me out for ATER not squeezing. Like, I sat there and basically said here in the threes that I literally wrote, let me see. Let me pull this up. I just want to show you something. Like, you will always be remembered for your biggest mistakes, not for your anything else. Like, they don't give you credit when you do something well. You get usually just blamed when something goes sideways. Like, if I search my own post, right? I go back in the day, and I literally put in a DD on, let's see. I put an MMAT warning before it went, and it contracted. I said DTC earnings beat for those who've been patient. It did nothing there. And then somewhere in here I wrote, yeah, right here. So this was 8 months ago. Why DTC will move up eventually regardless of any Reddit forum pumping it. Like, I wrote that and got 4 upvotes, 18 upvotes, and 79 upvotes on that, right? So 8 months ago, I called out that this thing was going to recover. It was literally like, I started looking at the fundamentals. They had beat. These are all beats. Every single one of these green ones is a beat. And the stock was still down, way down here. So I knew this thing was going to move back up. So, I mean, they have another earnings coming up, and that could be a chance for it to pivot and go down. But, like, if you bought in here at, like, 342 and started just accumulating in the threes and the fours, this thing's not, you 2x your money. Yeah, I did call out BBAI. That's another one I actually called out, and I said I was accumulating a ton back during the. Let me see. It was in our Discord. I kept saying that I was going to accumulate under $1, so I was buying a ton of BBAI back here when it was sub $1. Like, here's the $1. Like, this entire time I just kept buying and buying and buying. Like, this entire time. Because I knew that they have the huge gap up here that needs to fill, and I'm good with buying it down here, even though they have warrants and they have other things that are in the mix. Now we have another gap down here, which I really wish they filled. I really wish it was just like have gone straight up and then straight down so I could accumulate more. Now we're in this weird like spot right here where we're just chopping around. But like I do want, if it gets back down to 85 cents again, I'm buying more because regardless of this, I think this is a company to buy long term, even with the warrants and all that. So I'm just saying, like, you start looking at things that I've called out that are right. No one's talking about those. I'll always be the guy that tried to squeeze ATER apparently and failed. So everything's your biggest failure. So like, and that stuff weighs on you. Like I don't want anyone to lose money. Like I am legitimately like upset that people, are down right now. Like I'm down. There's a bunch of people down. Hold on. Keith's writing something. I need ATER at 5 soon. Yeah, I mean, we all do. Look how many gaps are on the upside. Like, look here. You've got gaps here at 835, 480, 307, 278, 258, 174. So, like, there's a ton of gaps down here, but it sometimes takes a while. Like, I mean, look at DTC. DTC had 4 straight beats on earnings and still was pinned down here until they couldn't hold it down anymore. Now, they do have a gap up here, which I hope they do fill, and that's at like 4 something. But, like, for me, I've already started selling my DTC because, I can always, I'm waiting for this gap to fill. I think I will have an entry point at some point. But this is a stock that, like, if you held on to it, it was doing really, really well. You no longer believes that all gaps fill. No, not all gaps fill, but there are ones that do, and it depends. Dirty's waiting for DTST. Yeah, I've still got DTST still. I think I'm down like 10, 20, 12%, something like that. Yeah, so like I'll give you a perfect example, Keith. So we're sitting here, right? Here's the SPY. So there are gaps down at like 229, and I think there's even further ones down here. You'd have to go really far back in history, but there are gaps down here at like the 50s that probably never will fill. But in the recent times, there are pretty significant gaps that need to fill. I don't know if it will ever get down that low again. Now, we could have some sort of catastrophic event where we touch this and then just start heading down and then get back to like COVID levels again. It's entirely possible, but like I think more likely that this area is on the table versus it's possible that the 280s is on the table, but like that would be a pretty significant drop. Like, yeah. So like, but going back to ATER, for example, ATER just needs to actually do better, right? So like, look, this one was an actual earnings beat, right? So we actually had an earnings beat here. Since basically, what was that? First quarter of 2022, we've missed. Now, this one wasn't a bad miss, but we still missed. So, like, this one was not as bad. But this was this time where, like, you basically had 1, 2, 3, 4, barely 5, 6, 7, 8 straight or 8 misses with one random one in the middle where they did slightly better. Like, so it all depends. Like, once again, if ATER all of a sudden was positive EBITDA, starting to make traction in the right direction, it maybe takes out a good loan that actually gets good M&A, you could see this come back up, right? And fill some of these gaps up here. That's very possible. So it's not necessarily like all or nothing. Like, this is just where we're at right now. Until the stock actually starts doing better, this thing is going to be pinned down because right now there's not a ton of institutions that believe in Ethereum. Like, they used to have much higher institutional holders, right? Now, BlackRock's got like 5%, but we're talking about like a small amount of money. Like, this is not a lot of money. These guys are literally throwing like a penny at Ethereum, whereas these numbers were much, much higher back in the day. So once we start seeing institutions coming back in, that will be a good sign. Now, short interest dropping is actually good, because it means less people are thinking that Ethereum's going down, down, down without like a fight. So, but yeah, like right now, institutional ownership owns less than 17% of the stock. That used to be like 40% back in the day. Yeah, I mean, honestly, if ATER hit $7, most of us would be extremely, like, a lot of us would be rich, to be honest with you. Like, I've got a ton of 150 calls, like, a ton of them. Like, I've got a ton of January 2024 150 calls, and I'm starting to stack up some $1 calls, too. I'm not even being greedy. I'm just going closer to the money. And, you know, if those hit, like, that's a lot of money that will change hands if they just, the Ivy spikes on them. And that will make up some of the stuff. Eggplant emoji. But for Trey, I wish him all the best. Obviously, I'm so much smaller than he is. Like, he was way bigger than I was, and, oh, he actually got the eggplant emoji. Random's got it for you. Yeah, I mean, once again, AMC was the poor man's GME, and now a lot of people are realizing that Adam Aaron was never on their side. He was just using them to basically, I mean, the guy took bonuses. He sold his stock. Like, that was a critical, oh, I'm old, I need it for, dude, if you believed in the company, you would have never sold the stock. He knew that they were going to continue to dilute until they basically paid off all their debt. Like, the guy's a snake in the grass. I'm not impressed by him. I think he is Wall Street through and through, and he's been given an opportunity to basically help himself and his friends, and he's basically used retail to do that. So, I mean, I can't say nice things about the guy. And anyone that believed in him and thought that he was being honest and truthful didn't dig very deep on who he was. And then sat there and tried to defend every action. Like, listen, I don't defend every action on Ethereum. If they make a mistake, I call it out, and I have. Like, I don't think they should have diluted when they did. Like, I also think they should have raised an ATM versus going to Armistice. I mean, Armistice to me was like the lazy way. They're like, hey, we'll give you some money if you just give us some shares, probably because they were shorting them. And Ethereum was like, yeah, like, you could have done an ATM at any point back in this area. Like, you could have done that. But they chose not to. You could have done an ATM during this area when it ran all the way up to 19 a share. Why didn't you do an ATM there? Like, way better than all these loans and other things that they were taking out. Like, you could have used retail to actually, like, help the company and actually help those shareholders, because when raising money when it was 19 a share, if they had sold a bunch of shares, then it would have raised so much more money. Back here too, like, when you were this high, why didn't you actually raise some cash? Like, you knew you weren't supposed to be this high. You should have sold shares during these times and actually, like, made out, and instead of sitting here when the stock is 188 and then announcing dilution. Like, you basically were waited till you were out of cash and then you diluted. Like, every hedge fund knew what was happening. Like, they know, they get to see your balance sheets. They know what your cash burn is. They basically just waited you out and then said, hey, listen, why don't we'll give you some cash. Why don't you give us some warrants and shares? Like, they played it wrong, in my opinion. So, I mean, And I'm allowed to have a different opinion than them. Like if they think they played this all right, then that's fine. But to me, I don't think they played it perfectly. So I'll call it out. So I'm not going to sit there and defend them when they don't deserve to be defended in my eyes. But like this was a stock that they could have maximized on even just this run, diluting in this. What they did was they gave Armistice the ability to basically raise money for Armistice and not raise money for the company. Like you had retail support, like heavy retail support, even while it was falling all this time. Retail was in this entire time. And what did you do? You diluted on them by going to literally a hedge fund that pushed it up, and then they were the ones making all the money, not Aterian. Had they basically just said, listen, we're going to do a shelf, and then they pushed it up, the stock squeezed, they could have issued out like shares and raised money during that time. Like, that's my honest opinion. Like, I don't know why they didn't do that. And it's probably because Armistice told them not to. They were like, no, we'll lend you. So now we're waiting on Armistice, because they were the ones that caused this. So now we're waiting on them to do it again at some point. Hopefully in this time frame. But yeah, options essentially right now are basically like nothing's going on until end of May. So I don't expect anything really to happen in this time frame. I really should have just kind of chopped it around, slow bleed to like a new low, but okay, so let's see. Anna, what's your opinion on GFAI? Which one was GFAI? Looks like number one, they have a little bit of dilution on there. They're a tiny float. I mean, that's like a micro float. They are cash flow positive, but let's see. They've got warrants at $46, but are these adjustable? They're full ratchet. Convertible notes at $8. I mean, they've already had a significant move up, right? So they went from basically like $5 a share to 21, bled back down. Now they're here. They've got a gap up here at 50 or 63, but I will tell you right now, these warrants and these convertible notes that haven't been registered yet, they probably will get registered if they're in there. But essentially, if you look here, the conversion price is at $8. So at any point, they can release these like 213,000 shares, which all of a sudden would take your float from about 1.25 million to, what would it be? So, I mean, that would relieve some pressure there. And then you also have these warrants up here. Now, granted, they're such a small like cap. Then, so this one's one of those. So 80% of multiplied by the lowest VWAP during the 10 trading days prior to the applicable measuring date, which is, it's coming up. So if you actually look here, the maturity date on these is 10. So it's coming up later this year. So I expect them to probably get registered. Now, it's not like the end of the world dilution, but like it will probably slow it. But at the same time, they're cash flow positive, so it's possible they still got some juice in the tank. They've got this gap up here. They have a huge gap up here, but like that's not gonna, I don't think it's gonna get to 300 again. What was the deal with these guys? They did a split. That's what it was. So, yeah, that's not coming back there. Randomest ratchet, but we love them. Does mid-cap agreement prevent ATMs? It probably does. That's probably why they didn't do it. I'd have to dig through the filing again, though. It's been a while since I read it. But, like, they didn't have that deal with mid-cap until after the stock squeezed once on Ethereum. So... CXAI. Yeah, but it looks like it has some room because it's such a small. If retail actually went in on that, it would be interesting. Let's see, CXAI. Big gap down. It's filled that gap since then. Now there is a bull gap left at 164. Share price is $7. So there's a pretty significant gap here. Let's take a look. Let's deal with these guys. CXAI. Okay, so they are running out of cash. They have a load. These things aren't registered, it looks like. But it looks like they just registered them. Or no, they're not registered yet, but they will be. They just started. So we're in April right now. These things are pretty fresh. They're public SPAC. Exercise price of $11.50. So it's once again small float, but if they release these things, that's gonna basically open everything up. So this one might run just based off of. So they got it close to SPAC numbers again, but this is where they closed. Yeah, botch back. I mean, at some point they're going to probably try to get the warrants back up to that exercise level so they can start releasing those shares. So, could it have a short run during that time frame? Sure. Tiny float. If you got retail in on it, that's what they're probably trying to do with this large move up, right? So you just had this huge move up. That's what I see. All right. Normally, let's see, how many people we have in here? We got 10 people. I do have to do a couple things. So I was out this evening, and I came back home to a circus. So my wife has off tomorrow, and she had a rough day. So she has gone to bed with our son. But yeah, I think I'm gonna head out because I got a bunch of dishes and a bunch of things to kind of get done for tomorrow. But yeah, let's do this. Does anyone have? We've been trying to get L to meet up with us, but I think he's been really busy. So I'd love to have him actually do the. Oh, hold on. I was going to ask how a SPAC merger works. It's not my area of expertise, to be honest with you. Let me see if we can come up with an answer real quick. Let's try to come up with something. All right, let's see what we get. So SPACs, for anyone that doesn't know what they are, is based, and they're not people don't like SPACs now. I think there's been a lot of bad taste in people's mouths recently about SPACs. The SEC is starting to kind of really look into them. They're special purpose acquisition companies that basically the money comes first, and then they basically find somebody's company to basically put onto the market. So, for example, DNA was one of them that was a recent SPAC that was, I think, 23andMe. So what they do is they basically find these companies that are big enough to be on the market but don't have a ticker yet, and they basically say, hey, we've got bags of money. Why don't you guys come in here? But the problem with those deals is the people that get in first, it was like, yeah, it was more of a pandemic thing, but it's been around for a while, but it got popular during the pandemic. And basically what a lot of times happens is they basically use retail. Everyone gets excited about these things, and next thing you know, it kind of blows up and everyone loses a bunch of money except for the people that initially got in on it. The SEC does not like that. So SPACs are also like a way of raising money through an IPO for the purpose of buying an existing company, but it's not usually the best thing to do. Is SPACs most of the time look like this for a long time when they're like pumping it, and not pumping, but like getting marketing and getting eyeballs around it, and then when they go live, this is always what happens. All these people that raised the money during here get out. And then usually what ends up happening is they sell there, they let the stock bleed out, and then sometimes they come back in and they pump it. But, there's a whole bunch of like just games that they play. I mean, you can look at a ton of different SPACs. For example, I know for a fact Joby was one, aviation company. And this is what you'll see. They start out here at $10 because that's typically where they start. So they'll start at $10. Somebody might hype them, right? So they run up a little bit higher. They're only worth 10 though during this time. So and then they'll kind of consolidate around 10 around again, right? And then they'll chop and then they'll bleed off, right? So then typically what you see is you'll see at some point they'll find a bottom, they'll consolidate, and then they'll move back over. But 10 is usually the normal number. Let me try this one more time. Get work. Yeah, so SPACs don't have to have business operations stated for the acquisition. They literally are just a money company until they find a company to back. So there's a ton of resources you can Google, but so yeah, but typically that's what happens is the stock is worth $10 when it comes out, and then most of the time what ends up happening is they bleed off for a while, find a low, they'll consolidate, they might find a new low, and then this is one that will eventually probably head back up. But there's a ton of these things, and that's why if you kind of look, most IPOs you can. Let's take a big one. What was the one Warren Buffett liked? Snow, right? So this one was backed by Warren Buffett. So this is the IPO, but Snowflake came out, right? And it pumped in the beginning, and then it eventually just bled off. These are earnings beats the entire time, but you can see what this thing was. This was overvalued, right? Warren Buffett got in way before, so he got in at a discounted price, so that's why he didn't care. But you can kind of look at these different IPOs and SPACs, and most of them will have a significant downturn at some point because the people that put money in initially want to take it out. They can always buy back in if they want, but they do hostile takeovers. SPACs usually don't end up being hostile takeovers. SPACs typically they put basically the cart before the horse. So they say, hey, we have a bunch of people that are willing to pay a bunch of money into this basically money bag, and we'll find somebody to acquire later. So that's why it's the special purpose acquisition, right? That's what the SPAC stands for. Yeah, so according to research, SPAC public investors versus the founders often pay the price of dilution. Yeah, that's what ends up happening is these guys basically come out, they find a bunch of investors and say, hey, we're going to make a bunch of money. And they're like, what's the product? And we're like, we'll figure it out later. But just know that if you get in now, you'll make a bunch of money. You'll have a chance to exit, and then later on, we'll figure everything else out. And that's why the SEC doesn't like this, because the SEC kind of is like, wait a second, guys, you don't even know what you're doing half the time, and then you're trying to sell this to the public, and then you guys are always taking your money out in the beginning. Like, yeah, I bet you if I typed in SEC doesn't like SPACs. Yeah, like here's an article. SPACs are hot, but SEC is watching. Like the SEC knows that this is basically like, not, I wouldn't say pump and dumps, but like they are not. Yeah, the SEC is coming for SPACs, March 2022. This sometimes it looks like the SPAC sponsor is running a scam. Like that's all you need to know. Like when that's like one of the first things you write about is like yeah, so that's essentially what SPACs are. Is they put the cart before the horse. They don't even know what the product is, and they're like, yeah, here's bags of money. So most of the time SPACs, you'll see a chart that looks like that. Or let me think of any SPACs that I remember recently. DNA. Was that the one? Yeah, like look at these things. Like they start out around $10 and then they pump for a second. This is when all the founders and everybody gets out, and then it just free falls, right? Like they this is what they do. Like what are all the SPACs that I remember recently? Think, Ammon, think. What other things were SPACs? Let me see. Maybe we can come up with a list of SPACs. But, like, they're going to look all the same. Recent SPACs. Let's see. All right, let's try another one. Let's try Starry. Oh, no, that one didn't even work. Exela. You guys remember this one? Exela merged, reversed through a SPAC. CRXT. That one didn't even show up. CRZ. Nothing there. Is that because they're delisted? Some of these might have been delisted. Maybe what we should do is this. Oh, okay. Here's a couple. Go EV. Go EV was a SPAC. Right? SPAC, $10, right? Pumps, dumps. DWAC. Look at this. Pump, dump. When every single one of these is the same thing. SoFi. I don't even know what I was doing there. All right. Yeah. Like pump, dump. Like all these SPACs are like fun. Oops. I added a Y in there. Fun. Pump, dump. I'm just saying, like, that's what these SPACs do. SPACs pump and then they dump. The people that get in early get a chance to exit with liquidity is high, and then they get stuck. Clove. You guys remember Clove? Clove. $10. Pump, dump. These are all So yeah, you wanted. Now you kept me on even longer. I need stuff. I got stuff to do. You DM'd the list of specs, but yeah, like I mean, if you might find an oddball that might actually make it, but for the most part, like that's not a good thing. Yeah. So typically IPOs and SPACs I stay away from until they bottom, and then I'll look at them if they have a decent business model. But like, there's just too many that you have to remember. People are buying in early when they're private and getting equity, and then they're able to exit by basically pumping forums and other things while they exit, getting retail excited, and then leaving retail holding the bags. Remember? Yeah. I have 2 SPACs, SoFi and LSID, that I happily trade for the turd. Yeah. Ben, I'm with you. I mean, you can't even write covered calls that are worth it on Ethereum right now because the IV's just crushed. So the only positive to that is because IV is crushed, you can stack a bunch of cheap options. So, I mean, if you're down significantly on shares, and I'm not recommending anyone do this, but I'm saying for me, I'm hoping to make some of that back with long dated like leaps that are like close to the money, and I'm hoping that makes up some of the difference when Ethereum eventually does go back up. So, but it's one of those things where like at the same time, like you see all those different, whenever this is the norm for a SPAC, it means you should probably stay away from it, especially when it's getting a lot of hype. So, yeah, I mean that is the possibility. Like now, I don't think the reverse split happens anytime soon. They have plenty of time before that happens, and if they do go positive EBITDA, then it will reverse and go over $1 no problem, and then it's not even an issue. Everybody, if you remember back when we were a couple weeks ago, everybody was like sitting there talking about reverse splits, wanting to know how it all worked when we were down here. And then we went up to like, what was it, 170, something like that, almost 180. And then nobody was talking about reverse splits. But as soon as we went back down over under $1, everyone's talking about reverse splits again. So, I mean, someone clearly had it come back up. There was a large volume that traded, especially on this day. So I think somebody bought, like in this time frame, there was starting to be some buying volume. So since then, though, we've really had no volume. Yeah, no, I mean somebody basically wanted the stock to go back up, and it did. We know for a fact that this time right here, right? So when we hit the all-time low, this was Armistice selling their shares during this time frame. So Armistice was holding on to a bunch of shares and then eventually sold off all of them by the time we actually got the 13Fs. So this drop right here, this pump that day, and then the drop came from was basically Armistice. They got the shares and the warrants, or I think on this day, and then they basically pumped it the day before, or had Ethereum release positive news coming up on the earnings, and then they diluted. So, but yeah, like once again, I'm just hoping for something like this. One of these scenarios, even if it dips down to the like past the all-time low, this would be basically a spring test in my eyes, unless they basically announce, as long as they keep their cash burn under control, this would be a spring test. If they don't keep their cash flow or their cash burn, under control, then yeah, we could see more dilution coming. But as long as they do what they're supposed to, the margins will help, and I'm hoping that just they need to find a way of trimming some of the expenses. It's good hearing from you, Anon. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. Like, I was half tempted to not stream tonight just because it was like last time I think we had like 5 people, and I was like, why am I streaming for like 5 people? Like it just seemed like, you sit there and spend a couple of hours talking to like a couple of people, and it's like, should I keep doing this or not? Like, it's not even like an ego thing. It's just like that point, is it worth it? Like, but I think what I thought about was there was a bunch of people that come in here like every single like Tuesday and Thursday that actually want to talk about stocks, and I do like talking about stocks. So I'm like, let's just do it, even if it's like 10 people, which is what we had today. That's still better than like I think it just adds a different element, being able to kind of like hear me talk and like we work things out together. So yeah. And at some point it will turn around. But it's one of those things, like I said, like Tyrion right now is my biggest, Tarifa's missing you. I'm always going to be remembered now for this failure versus the right things that I called out, like DTC or BBAI. But yeah, I've got one of my friends who was buying DTC under $3, or sorry, under $4 in the threes. And he just was stacking it because I was like, I like this company. He's like, I like it too. He's like, I like Chubby's. I bought a bunch of stuff from Chubby's, and he bought like 50,000 shares or something. It was crazy. And he's like, dude, I am killing it. And I'm like, make sure you take some profit. Like, I don't want to be the guy that doesn't tell you to take some profit. So I told him, I was like, dude, you should probably take some profit. So he started selling in the 6s and 7s, and now it's up over 8. But yeah. Yeah, and I think the next step is really just getting those alerts going, because all we need is just the Python. If we can get L to help us with the Python, and at the end of the day, I don't know if he's going to have time, but if he's able to, I'd love to be able to actually write out that code and just be able to start doing scans every day, putting out alerts, and starting going from there. So that's the goal. He's just been busy the last couple of weeks. I have been writing him and asking him to see if he could jump on with me. We did do one meeting, and it went really well. And then since then, he's been really busy. So, and I'm kind of at his mercy, because I've got like a bunch of like ideas and stuff that I wrote down that I want him to like program, and he's just not been on. So if anyone else knows somebody that has Python experience or knows how to like do this stuff, but he's got to step ahead, because he's already written a bunch of the program. So that's why I'm trying to stay with him and do that. But I do want to get it going. So I'll keep on him, see if he's available this weekend. Maybe a couple of us can sit down and start building that out. But really what we need is like maybe I have to pay for an API, like a good API service, and then we're able to pull that data into our own like database, and then from there start to write out like the Discord alerts and stuff like that. Oh, is it your like 3D thing? Is that what you're talking about, Random? Show some legs, bro. I showed you guys my cankle. Yeah. I mean, it's a really cool idea. I have no idea how to actually like do that, because that's like visualization of data, which is very cool. But at the same time, it's like I have no idea how to write that or even help with that at this point. I told you I have a cousin, or it's actually my second cousin, my cousin's daughter, and she's going to school, studying data science, and she's real smart. But I'd love to get her at some point, just to kind of like, hey, listen, like we got some project going on. I know this isn't probably what your passion is, because I think she wants to lean towards like environmental science or something like that. But like, I was like, I just want to borrow your brain, because I think she's getting her master's right now from like a really good school in data science, and so I'd love to be able to just be like, here's a bunch of data. How do we like get things better? So anyway, and I think her dad actually is really into like the stock market too. So I don't know if she's just been turned off by the fact that her dad does this stuff, or but like they're doing just fine. Yeah, but I'm trying, but she's also like finishing her masters right now. I think she'll be done in the summer. I think her finals are coming up, and that's why she's especially busy. But I think she said she's done after May, so I'm trying to get her to come in here and muck it up a little bit. But I I'm not going to tell you guys who she is because that would obviously tie back to me. But I'm going to just see if we can bring her into like one of the private rooms and just be like, all right, so we got a bunch of ideas. No, so I'll be honest, Dirty. I don't think she's going to have any student loans. I'm pretty sure she got a scholarship, and on top of that, I'm pretty sure her parents did pretty well. So, I'm pretty sure her dad literally built like the infrastructure for the internet. They live in the Bay Area, and like he's been in Silicon Valley since like the 80s, 90s. So he literally like laid down infrastructure for the internet becoming the internet. So I don't think they have to plot twist. It's actually nut job. I haven't been in the ATER room, to be honest with you, in a while. Unless somebody ats me, it's just I'm like nothing's going on there. So I have nothing to contribute at this point. Like a home, she'll need it. I mean, I'm gonna try to just be like, hey, would you take a look at this? And Nutjob hates. Pretty sure Nutjob hates me too, but that's okay. Like she's entitled to. She is absolutely entitled to hate me. Same with Tarifa and all you guys. Like if you want to hate me, that's totally fine. Like if you need a finger to point, I'm the one. So, like I said, I feel for Trey if he had like that breakdown. Like it's not a good feeling when everyone hates you. And like we're very different because like I chose not to show my face during all this because I just figured if you're fighting with people over essentially a lot of money in some cases, I didn't want to be that guy that's like I know I could get probably more viewership if I actually just revealed who I was and just had actually you guys could see me and put all that information out there, but I just want to keep it this way. I've got young kids, and I don't know. Maybe it's the Marine in me, but like to me, OPSEC was like kind of instilled in my brain. Like you don't make enemies, you don't like do things to draw attention to yourself. That's why it's Anon, the face of ATER. You know what? I'll just wear. Should I just be the masked investor? Just wear the mask. I was thinking maybe I would just wear a green screen on my face and you guys can put anything you want on it. I thought that was pretty funny. I was like, maybe I'll just wear a green screen. And you can just put, whatever you want on there. But then I was like, that's probably going to get people in trouble, or me in trouble. All of a sudden, people are going to be putting, like, Mussolini and Hitler and like Putin on my face, and next thing I know, I'm gonna be in trouble with YouTube. Vala Mogulis. The many-faced god. A girl does not want. By the way, for all the Game of Thrones fans out there, great show, horrible ending. It just didn't make any sense. That's the truth. Like, I don't know. It was so good. Like, everything was so good until, like, the last season. And then they just, like, rushed it and it became a flaming pile of turd. And I'm like, just redo it. Like, I wish they could just redo it. Like, I know George R. R. Martin didn't have the ending. What was it? I don't even think it's out yet, right? The Winds of Winter, that never even released, right? It's been like 15 years since he started like the books. Winds of Winter, right? It's the planned 6th book, right? Did it actually come out? He said it's 75% done back in April. So this was recently. So he said it's 75% done. When did the last book come out? He got paid and he was like, I don't have to write this. The AI started stumbling over the word because I asked Jon Snow was alive. I mean, here's the thing, right? So everyone's like, "Oh, Night's Watch, he shouldn't have been able to leave his post." I'm like, technically, he died, so like, he was free to leave because that was the clause, right? It was like, until you die, you're the Night's Watch. Well, he died, so technically, Jon Snow's watch came to an end, right? I mean, what was the last? Dance of Dragons, right, was written in no, that can't be right. 2011. Or sorry, 2011. Wow. So that book is like 12 years in the making. Yeah, I've heard all sorts of crazy theories about Game of Thrones. Like, I heard somebody that was a writer, and he was like, "This is how they could have fixed the ending of Game of Thrones." He was like, first off, they had all these like beautiful mystery pieces they set up in the beginning. Like, I don't know if you ever heard of I like movies and like TV shows, and I like people that kind of think about what they're doing, right? So like, in the beginning, J.J. Abrams was always talking about the box. He's like, you got to give the viewer a box. And inside the box is this mystery that you don't know what it all means at some time. Like, but the longer you can keep the box without like getting it stale and stagnant, he's like, the better. And the more you can build around this. So literally that first episode, and I've watched it so many times, you had all those intricate patterns, and like, by the way, they never freaking explained what those things meant. They like started the show with this mystery box that they never bothered solving. There was no resolution. There was like all these just loopholes that they just never tied up, and I'm like, that's really sloppy writing. Yeah, like, but here's the thing, right? Like, why didn't they go into that, like, for the ending? I know this is now turned into a non-stock thing, but, I'll just talk about it because, I mean, that's obnoxious. Remember, they used to put the bodies in different patterns, and, like, they never explained that. So this writer's like, that's just sloppy, and he's like, you need to have... Yeah, The Last of Us was good. But like this guy was like, you need to figure out what to do with that, and so he tied in like some storyline that he liked, which had nothing to do with the books, but he just thought it was a better way of tying up some of these loose ends. And he basically was like, listen, so Danny burning down. Sorry if this is a spoiler for anyone that hasn't seen it, but like, Danny burning down the city, like that just seemed very out of character. The progression didn't like. I think the way it should have gone is it would have slowly been in like a descent into madness. That's what it should have been. Like, it was just, it was just so rushed at the end. Like, and that's why it felt so out of place, was because essentially what happened was you couldn't progress the story any longer. You had one season to wrap everything up. So all of a sudden it was just this whiplash of like Danny's helping all the women and children and all these people, and like then she just burns women and like it just didn't make sense. So like there were all sorts of plot holes, and this guy was like, the better way of doing it was basically like at some point Danny would have had to go out, and John was going to sacrifice himself, trying to defeat the Night King. Was it Night King? Was that what it was called? I can't remember now. Was it Night King? Is that right? Something. What was it? Was it Night King? Yeah, Night King. So like he would have like sacrificed himself, and then Danny was gonna basically go. Remember, they didn't like really tie back the weirwood trees, but this writer was basically like, you need to basically have it where like one, all the weirwood trees are all connected to where they made the Night King. That's the only way you can kill the Night King. So like it was just, like a way cooler version. Like she was going to fly her dragon up there, and so she had a choice of either saving John or ending the winter. And so she flies up and saves the winter, sacrificing John, and it was just a much better ending that I think people would have liked. So if you ever get a chance, that's a YouTube video somewhere. You maybe put alternate ending, but it was just way better. It would have played much better for the HBO audience. And yes, The Last of Us was awesome. Yeah, all this stuff seems sloppy and whatever. But yeah, like in Last of Us, I loved, and I played the video game, so like I really enjoyed that. Everyone was complaining like, oh, we barely even saw the. I'm like, it had a good story, so like it doesn't really matter. They basically covered the first game in its entirety in the first season, and like I guess they're going to cover the second game, which I haven't played, by the way. I probably will now that there's been a TV show, because I do want to know kind of how they. Yeah, I mean the game was so good. I remember like I think I just had my first kid when I played it, because I was a little bit late to the playing it, and like literally like I'm watching that first scene, and I teared up, and I'm like, oh my god, like what game is this? Just watching Joel with it, it's crazy. All right, I do need to get off. All right, get off now. All right. You guys have a great one, and then we'll see you next week on Tuesday, and then I'll probably be around, though. If you need me, just at me on the Discord, and I'll talk to you guys later.